That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon.
You know, today's passage was picked out a few months ago, and I tell you what, I was wrestling with how do you preach on wrestling? That's not my typical sermon fodder. But you know what? It actually, you dig into it, there's a lot of great stuff there, and I think we're only going to scratch the surface. But when it comes with wrestling, I think we can all identify, and I hope to bring that out today. In the journey of faith, there are pivotal moments that define who we are and how we relate to God. Genesis 32 presents one such transformative encounter. After years of deception, manipulation, and running from his past, Jacob finds himself alone at the ford of the Jabbok River. With his family's sin ahead and his brother Esau approaching, with 400 men, Jacob faces the greatest crisis of his life. It is in this moment of vulnerability and fear that God meets Jacob in a mysterious wrestling match that would forever change not only his name, but his very identity. This divine encounter teaches us profound lessons about authentic faith, persistent prayer, and the transformative power of wrestling with God. So I'm going to answer 3 questions today about this passage. And the first question is, I want to ask, who is the man? It says that Jacob wrestled with the man. Now, there's different takes depending on the scholars you talk to. And I kind of think they can all be the same. You see, they say, well, maybe it's a pre-incarnate theophany, that is God himself in the form of the man. Maybe it's Jesus, the second person of the Trinity. Others have speculated, well, maybe he's wrestling with himself because he's going to meet his brother that he cheated out of his birthright, if you remember the story. You see, Jacob had been living a whole life of cheating people, tricking people. His name actually even means heel. You know, in wrestling, there's such a thing as a heel and a baby face. Have you ever heard those terms before? The heel is the bad guy. And Jacob's name means to grasp the heel, which is kind of interesting, I think. And then you have this situation now that as life has progressed and Jacob has gotten married and he has wives and children and he's making his way back to his home, he's got to run into his brother Esau, and he's very concerned about how this interaction is going to take place. And his brother Esau was always bigger than him. And when they would wrestle, he would always win. He was a burly guy. He was a strong guy. How do you beat a guy who's bigger than you when you're wrestling? And it's not just a metaphor with wrestling with God and our issues and our problems. It's about wrestling with other people, wrestling with our doctrine, wrestling with our morality, just wrestling with our families, our churches. We spend a lot of our life wrestling. And also we spend a lot of our time being restless. So who is the man? Who's the man? That same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children. Did I win? I don't know where that came from. And crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. So that's the question we're trying to answer. Who's the man? I'm not going to tell you for sure. But I do know one thing. from American philosopher and poet Ric Flair. He said this. He said, if you want to be the man, you have to beat the man. Did any of you used to watch professional wrestling when you were a little younger? Come on.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Rick, don't you? All right. You remember what he would do? He'd come out on TV and he would do his thing. You know, he'd go, woo! You know, when I wrote this, my voice wasn't as bad, but go along with me here. To be the man, you gotta beat the man. And let me tell you something, pal. There ain't nobody in the world that's ever going to take this crown off my head. I'm Ric Flair, the styling, profiling, limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing son of a gun. I've got more gold around my waist than Fort Knox has in its vaults. Diamonds are forever, and so is Ric Flair. I'm the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, custom suit strutting king of the ring. You see, I don't just walk into a room, I own it. I step into that squared circle, I'm not just wrestling, I'm painting a masterpiece. With every strut, every chop, every figure four leg lock, that makes grown men cry for their mamas. Do you remember Ric Flair? He was the best. 21-time world wrestling champion. Now his wrestling was a little staged. But I tell you what, those guys, they knew he was going to win, but they traveled the country, they worked hard, and every time they hit each other or fell to the ground, they really hit each other and they really fell to the ground. But it made him a lot of money. It made him a success. And you know what? Ric Flair wrestled a lot of people. But I want you to realize he spent his whole life wrestling himself. In 1975, early in his career, when I was only 1 year old, Ric Flair survived a devastating plane crash that claimed the pilot's life and left him with a broken back. He had to get back in shape so he could get back into wrestling. An injury so severe that doctors doubted he'd ever wrestle again, but he defied the odds, returning to the ring within months. His personal life, however, has been tumultuous as his in-ring battles. Like a modern-day Jacob, Flair had 4 marriages and fathered several children. But fidelity was never his strong suit. He wrestled with being monogamous. It left a trail of broken vows in its wake. Financially, he rode a roller coaster, making and losing fortunes, grappling with tax troubles, and living a life as wild as his legendary promos. Tragedy struck deep when he lost 2 sons. His biological son Reed to a drug overdose in 2013, and his stepson Sebastian, whom he raised as his own, to suicide in 2024. Each lost a gut punch to the nature boy Ric Flair. Even now, Flair is still wrestling, but he's not wrestling opponents, he's wrestling himself. He's in his 70s now, and he's still learning lessons and striving to be a better man. My prayer is that I hope he finds Christ one day, and he submits his life to the Lord, because we're all wrestling somebody or something, and for Ric Flair, the toughest opponent he's ever faced stares back at him in the mirror every day. Mark 8:36 says this, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his own soul?" You can be on top of Space Mountain, as he would say, and you'd have all the money, all the fame, all the fortune. But I think when you get around 70, you start to realize that family is more important than all of that. And those are the things we wrestle with. So the first question is that I'm trying to answer: who was Jacob wrestling? Who was the man? I think all the answers are correct, because when you wrestle with God, you're wrestling with yourself. And when you wrestle with yourself, you're wrestling with God. And you're just wrestling. Now, there's a strange part in the text where it says that Jacob overcame the man, yet he is touched on the hip and stops fighting. Yet he still holds on. It's a little murky. It's like, who won? It says that Jacob wrestled the man. Who is the man? So, who won the match? Let me show you the passage again. I had it read for you this morning, but it says, "When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, 'Let me go, for the day has broken.' But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. There's two sub-questions I want to answer here if possible. Why couldn't God overcome Jacob? Like, are they in the same weight class? How do you put up a fight with God? What's it talking about? I think there's some metaphor here. There's some symbolism here. I should have had why did he, but I got what. But what did he touch his hip for? Why did he touch his hip? Why did the man touch his hip? Let's see if we can learn from the hottest martial art sweeping the nation. Now, I know you guys don't do this on a regular basis yourselves, but do you have some grandchildren that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? There's someone laughing over there. Okay, we got one. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a martial art that is 99% of it is wrestling. Okay, and they got this thing called rolling, which is what we would call wrestling, but it's the sparring. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the goal is to get the other person to submit. It's called a tap out. You've heard the word tap out, correct? Get them to tap. Another way to put it is when you were little, did you ever bully anyone and say uncle? Remember say uncle? Okay, say uncle is the same thing as a tap out. It's the same thing going on here in the passage where the man, most likely God, he touches the hip. He throws the hip out. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that would be called a hip flexor. Okay? Rolling is more than just a word. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, rolling is sparring, and it's where the magic happens. A seasoned practitioner can take on someone less experienced, redirect their wild energy, and let them tire themselves out, all while staying in control. It's an art within the art. The better person comes down, so to speak, to their level, giving them a good match, making it feel competitive, but the truth is, they're never really in danger. Do you understand? You can be wrestling, you're better than the other person, but you're keeping it close so that the other person can learn, can feel your energy, pick up some lessons. I think that's what we got going on here in today's passage. Can you really beat God in a wrestling match? No. But can you be stubborn with God? Yes. And sometimes stubborn is not a bad thing. And we're going to learn that today. You see, that other person, that better person, could end the match anytime they choose. Then there's the second layer of rolling we need to unpack, the tap out. That's the moment when you realize that you're done. Especially when a finishing hold locks in. When somebody's got a rear naked choke on you, an arm bar, a foot lock, a toe hold, a knee compression, any of those things, a triangle choke, a googleada, and anything like that. What happens? You realize, I got a tap. They caught me. I'm done. What Jacob did, though, was after he was tapped out, he held on. And he said, God, I'm not going to let go. When he's talking to the man, he's starting to figure out who it is he's wrestling at the end of it. But it was God. He says, I'm not going to leave until you bless me, because I just figured out who this is. I've been wrestling with you the whole time. I've been wrestling with you, God, all my life. And since I got you here, even though you've thrown my hip out of joint, I'm not letting go until you bless me. It's a sort of spiritual stubbornness that I think God appreciates. I'm not going to give up on God. God never gave up on me, and I'm not giving up on God. And since I got you here, Lord, I want you to bless me. You see, when you're tapped out, you feel the pressure, you can't escape it, there's no choice but to tap. It's a time of surrender. It's a humbling thing, and it's exactly what God did with Jacob. He came down to Jacob's level. He wrestled him. But Jacob wouldn't quit until he had no other option. When God says Jacob has wrestled men and God and has overcome, he is talking about his will to fighting. Even after losing use of his hip, Jacob continued to hold on. I think God admired this trait. This is what we need to emulate. I want to tell you about a boy versus the beast. This is a real life story, something I saw. There was this boy came from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school and came to a new school. And he was pretty good in that old school. I think he was top dog. But when he got to the new school, he had to roll with the beast. And he was frustrated because every time he'd roll with the beast, he'd lose. He wanted to win. And he would come back every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, guess who was there? The old ugly beast. And the beast was tapping. It got frustrated. It got old. The thing is, when you're in jiu-jitsu, you lose for about the first year and a half. You never win. You get weeded out of that. If you can't stand losing, jiu-jitsu is not for you. Well, I just happen to have a little bit of video, 30 seconds, of this young boy and this ugly old beast. And I want you to see something here. He gets put in an armbar at first, and he fights and fights and fights. And then he gets out of it. And then he thinks he's on top, and he's ready to take control. And this is the last 30 seconds of a 5-minute match. But I think you understand what rolling is and what a tap out is. And I think this helps us understand the Bible passage. Remember, I didn't know I was going to preach on wrestling, so here we got to do the best we can. So you ready? There's the beast on top. He does not want to be in that arm bar. He's fighting. If she straightens that arm, he's going to tap. Look at him go. He's holding his arms together. He's fighting. He's fighting. He's got to come up. He's got to stack her. Uh-oh. He's on top now. He's going to try to pass the guard off to the side. And there awakening is a Guga Plata, pressure, and the tap. Man, she was ugly. But that's what rolling is. People going at it, and you're doing your best, and you just kind of keep losing sometimes until one day you just start winning. That's what this passage is about. It's about not giving up. We as Christians, are we saved by grace? Yes, we are. We're not trying to work our ways to heaven. But once we become Christians, it's important that we not give up. If we're a follower of God, we got to keep going. There's always this beast standing in the way. There's always a beast. What does it mean to strive? You see, God changed Jacob's name to Israel. And Israel ended up having 12 sons, which become the 12 tribes of Israel. Hey, now we know where that comes from, right? What does the passage say? The man said, your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you have, look here, struggled with God and with humans and have what? Overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. Jacob's like, who have I been wrestling all night? Who have I been fighting? He's starting to figure out it's God. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. Did he lose the match? Did he tap out? Yes, he did. But he also learned humility, so he won. And that's how you win with God. You become humble. We're going to close with this. As the sun rose over Peniel, Jacob limped away a changed man. He had seen God face to face and lived to tell about it. His new limp, his new name, and now his new testimony all bore witness to the transformative power of wrestling with God. Like Jacob, we were all invited into this divine wrestling match. This intimate, sometimes painful, always transformative encounter with our Creator. The path to blessing often leads to vulnerability, persistence, and struggle. But on the other side of that struggle is a new way of walking through life, a new identity rooted in relationship with God, and a new story to tell about God's grace and power. As we face our own jabbocks, as we cross our own rivers, those crisis points where we must confront our past and our true selves, may we have the courage to wrestle with God until He blesses us. For in that blessing, we find not just a momentary divine touch, but a permanent transformation that marks us as those who have truly encountered the living God. Ephesians 6:12 says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. I know it feels like we're just wrestling what's in front of our eyes. There's a lot of things that we cannot see we're wrestling with too. Aren't you glad you have a church that stands with you? Aren't you glad you know Jesus Christ is Lord? Today, if you don't know Jesus as Lord, I would invite you to come. I'd ask you to submit and humbly say, Lord, I need you in my life.